All right, everybody, we'll go ahead and get started. I want to respect your time. We may have a few people jump in over the next few minutes, but that's all right. I want to start things off by prefacing, we do have a giveaway today, a MagCube Pro, which is a wireless charger that syncs to your MagSafe. So it locks onto the back of your iPhone. I believe it's an MFI product. 3 hours of charge time, and it also has a kickstand. So great accessory for a long plane ride. You could set it up there on your little tray, watch a movie or a couple movies, and maintain full battery power. Awesome. And that winner will be announced at the end of our webinar. All right. So I just want to welcome everybody to the JSM Fundamentals webinar here with Expium. My name is Owen Pyatt, and I'm one of Expium's Atlassian consultants. Today, I'm going to be walking you through JSM to highlight some of its strengths and capabilities. I do just want to let you know that we have an ITSM webinar coming up next week that talks more in depth about how JSM handles ITSM features and functionality. You can sign up for that the same way you did for this webinar, and we'll have Kylie post that link here in the chat now. So Jira Service Management, what is it and who is it for? Most people are at least somewhat familiar with Jira when they find themselves in this class. Jira is Atlassian's core issue tracking and task management tool. Essentially, JSM has Jira's well-known issue management functionality, but it's rolled up into a service and support management tool. This allows for more advanced ticketing for internal and external customers, and ultimately provides them with a service. Before we really start talking about the functionality and features of JSM, I want to spend some time talking about the questions we often get surrounding who it's really for. Really, a lot of teams are service teams without even really realizing it. They are providing a service to either internal or external customers, and often there are a lot of channels of intake. Those channels can include email, phone calls, and unfortunately, even passing someone in the hallway and telling them to do something for you. The problem with this is that there is no clear prioritization or tracking when you are receiving requests in this manner. Because these requests are made so vague, there's no visibility for the requester that would let them know when their request will be handled. And as I'm sure we all know, this can lead to the requester bothering you for updates or going to your boss and asking when their request will be handled. And that's obviously something that no one wants. There is a solution for this though. The solution at a high level is a service desk that has a generic intake form, which will keep requesters up to date on where their request is in the process, or in other words, what status it's in, and when it could potentially be resolved. And this is just one example of many pertaining to the who JSM is really for. Before we move on, I want to preface some of these bullets we have on this slide here. So the ability to track and maintain SLAs. We're going to be doing a deep dive on SLAs at the end of our demo, but the ability to create service level agreements to make sure that your agents are staying on top of their work, and also making sure that your customers are getting their issues resolved in reasonable amounts of time. Also, the ability to connect to internal and external knowledge bases. With the use of Confluence, I'm not sure if there's anyone here using Confluence, another Atlassian product, but you're able to connect Confluence to your help center or service desk to help alleviate some of the request creations by maybe deflecting them, your users or your customers, to a knowledge-based article instead of raising a true request. And then also, lastly, the ability to automate repetitive tasks. With the use of automation for Jira, you are able to fully automate certain repetitive tasks or non-repetitive that are either taking up time or a little bit annoying. So a lot of efficiency gains to be made there with automation for Jira. It's a great tool. And what's even greater is that all of these features are included at any tier of Jira Service Management. All right. So as sort of a teaser for our ITSM webinar, the one that we're hosting next week, JSM has some advanced management features that we won't necessarily touch on too much in this webinar, but I do want to encourage you to pursue our ITSM webinar if you have any interest in learning more about incident management, change management, problem management, and assets, which is Atlassian's solution for an asset management tool. We also touch on the use of Opsgenie and Status Page. All right. So before we start our demo, I just wanted to provide a little bit of information about Expium and give you a sense of who we are and what we really do. We are a platinum solution partner with Atlassian, and what that means is that we provide a series of services. The first of that being training. We provide in-depth training sessions like this webinar, for example, but we also offer what we call a Jira Bootcamp. This is a 3-day deep dive into Jira, which trains you to be a Jira administrator. We do Confluence training as well, and we also now offer a Jira Service Management Bootcamp, which I'll post in the link in the chat momentarily. I'll post the link in the chat momentarily. Lastly, we offer user academies, which are more geared towards people who are just using the tool on a daily basis, but aren't necessarily administering them. We offer consulting across the entire Atlassian suite of products for a wide range of organizations, both large and small. And concerning the solutions we provide, it's important to note that our parent company, Oasis Digital, is actually a full stack software development company that creates custom software to where we can offer innovative solutions that integrate seamlessly with Jira. This includes the development of apps, custom integrations with using API, and we've gone as far as building complete custom front ends for Atlassian products. All right, so now that you've got a better idea of who we are and what we do, let's go in and dive into the tool and start our demo. So what we have here is our Help Center, and what we call internally at Expium, we call this the portal of portals. If you're familiar with Jira and how Jira is structured on the back end, what we have here is in our individual portal offerings under featured portals, these are actually our projects. And what's great about JSM is there's a lot of customization on the back end with how you actually want to present which products to who. So you're able to lock down certain projects to just a specific team or provide a portal offering to everybody. So a lot of functionality there. And before we move into our portals, I want to preface and bring attention to our search bar up here. Welcome to the Expium Help Center, and we have this is what's known as our smart search. So this is actually linked to our Confluence space. So say I was having a problem with a VPN. I would search VPN in our smart search bar, and then I'd be prompted with a few knowledge base articles that would help me hopefully deflect me and help me to resolve my issue without actually needing to raise a request. Or it will prompt me with the appropriate request types. But let's go ahead and hop into this first knowledge base article that we are presented. And very quickly, I can tell that this is not going to be of any help because it's in Latin and there's just a picture of a cat. So if I scroll down to the bottom here, we see that they were prompted with this question: did this article help? And in this case, very easy answer of no. And then just below that, we have, that simple yes or no will actually reference at the end of our webinar. So that's actually linked to the back end of Jira, and we're able to report on how helpful this article was. So then just below that, we see that we're prompted with, do you still need to raise a request? Then go ahead and contact us. So if the requester was to follow that link, they would be brought here to the correct portal offering, but not quite to the final stage. They'd be prompted with our portal groups. But before we discuss portal groups, request types, and forms, I want to hop back out to the Help Center to show more of the hierarchical pathway to actually get to the end result if we don't use our smart search bar. So we see our featured portals. I'll go ahead and select IT Service Desk. And here's where we are once again prompted with our portal groups. So a way to kind of think about what portal groups actually are and what role they play in this Help Center hierarchy is they're a way to categorize our request types. Some companies might have upwards of several hundred request types, And instead of having your customer, endlessly scroll or Control F search for their request type, you're able to add one layer of customization and categorization and organization to your request types. So we see our label, our heading for the portal group, and then just below that, you'll see some description text. This is a little bit misleading. Those are actually just the names of the request types. Unfortunately, that is not an editable field. It is just going to convey which request types live within the portal group. So we'll go ahead and go into our computers portal group. And another thing to kind of preface about this hierarchy, we see our breadcrumb trail starting to fill up here at the top. There are no more stages than just our help center, portal groups, and then request types, and then forms. There's no more customization that we can have there. There's no more layers. There are no more layers to the help center than those four. So we have had to get a little bit creative in how we utilize portal groups to kind of break out portal groups into multiple portal groups, but that's a different conversation. So here we're presented with our request types. So we have our little icon that's customizable, and then we obviously have the name of our request type. So we'll go ahead and request a new laptop. And we'll just start from the top here and work our way down. So we have our breadcrumb trail. These are both working links that can take us back to our help center or the portal groups. Then we have this contact us about. This is actually just a drop-down field, excuse me, a drop-down field of our portal groups in case the requester may have selected the wrong portal group and need to maneuver back to another one. Excuse me, need a drink of water after that one. Then we have, what can we help you with? Then this is actually just a drop-down of the associated request types within whichever portal group we're in. So if we did need to switch out, be like, oh, I'm in the wrong request type, you could easily maneuver to the next request type. Just below that, we have raise this request on behalf of. This is a user picker field within users in Jira, and you'd be able to type in another user or leave it as is. So another thing I want to preface before we move on, contact us about, what can we help you with, and raise this request on behalf of. These will always be there on every single request type. Those are system fields, and that's not actually living on our form. Those are just default. They can't be edited and they can't be moved. So it's something to keep in mind. So reason for requesting is actually where our form that we've built on the back end is actually beginning. So we have our little asterisk here notifying us that this field is required. And then we just have a simple drop down. And this form is actually built using what was once pro forma. If anyone's been in the Atlassian ecosystem for a while, it's now just fully integrated and is now just called forms. As a consultant, I call the forms, I call that a dynamic form, because there is still two different types of forms within Jira. One being a request form, it's a little bit confusing. One being a request form and one being this dynamic form. Both present similarly. Forms just has far greater capabilities in the customization of user experience and user interface. You're able to add tables, you're able to add a bunch of different custom fields, so a lot more customization there, as well as sections and display fields conditionally based on selections to fields above. Moving down, we have our any additional details field. This is actually a paragraph field, and what's really cool about JSM is you can link fields to system and custom fields on the back end. So within forms, if you were to build a form, a dynamic form, those would be what we call form fields, which don't actually carry any weight in the reporting functionality on the back end of Jira. They're not actually living within Jira. They're just a face value field that lives on the form. But what is really cool is you can link those fields to either a custom field or a system field. So as we see right here, this field is actually linked to our description field, which is a system field. So on the back end, it will display the information within the description. dropped our laptop from very high. So now let's work through what we can actually do inside of this field. We have the ability to, it's a full wiki style, and I may have to pick up my pace just a little bit here. So we have our ability to fully manipulate the size of the text. We're able to embolden, italicize. We're able to underline, strike through all of our text manipulation. And we have our shortcuts here for any shortcut gurus in the group. I know we have a couple here internally. You're able to change the color of the text to the dreaded red or anything else, maybe something a little happier. You're able to add bullets, numbers, a numbered list. You're able to add links. You're able to mention other users. So I go ahead and add Sam because he told me that my laptop could withstand the heavy fall or the high fall. And then we're able to, of course, add emojis. We're able to add tables, which is really cool. So say you're copying a bunch of data from maybe an Excel spreadsheet, you're able to drop that directly into the comment as a table, which is cool. You can add some code snippets. You can add an info panel. Take that out. Oh, sorry. And then you're able to add quotes, and then you're able to add dividers in as well. And that just deleted it all. Cool. So just below that, which model would you like? At face value, this looks just like a normal drop-down field, maybe similar to the one we have above, but this is actually linked to our asset management database known as Assets, which we'll touch on very in-depth in our ITSM webinar next week. But what's really cool is we're actually only presenting items that we currently have in stock to our requesters. And once, say this issue was to get fully resolved, we would then link this item to our user in the database. So then maybe down the line, they need assistance just repairing their hardware. The asset management database that's linked with Jira Service Management would know that I have the MacBook Pro with the certain MAC address, and that's mine. So some cool functionality there. So we will go ahead and submit this request. So here we see our submitted form. At the top, we see our breadcrumb trail, and then we have our issue ID that we'll touch on in just a bit. And this will only be important for our agents. So we see where our form was actually submitted, how it came across. And then just below that, we see the activity field. And this is going to keep our requesters in the loop of what's going on with our ticket. We're also able to add comments and comment directly to the agents on the back end who are actually working our ticket. Once again, same functionality as our description field on the past screen. So we could save that, and that's going to be posted on the back end. And then moving over to the right, we see our status. This is actually mirroring the status, excuse me. This is mirroring the status that the issue is in on the back end that's associated with the workflow. One thing to note, agents, you don't have to mirror every single status. So, say statuses are broken out into the 3 status categories of to do, in progress, and done. You may not want your customer to know every single step of the process that the issue's in, but you can let them know that it's in progress, that it's still waiting to be looked at, or that it is completed. Or you can just have it directly mirror. So a lot of customization there on the back end for what status you actually want to portray to your customers. You're able to turn on or off your notifications for this. You're able to cancel the request. And then below here, we see that our request type was logged. Then we have this shared with. So this is a cool feature. We can share this with internal users as well as non-Jira users. So we can just share this with an email. And they will get the same updates that we get as the requester. And then we see that this ticket is awaiting approval. So now that we've gone over what it's like to submit a ticket, let's go into the back end and see what it's like to actually work a ticket. So as mentioned earlier, we're going to use this issue ID. We're going to give that a click, and that's going to take us directly into the back end. as that loads. Awesome. So this is the back end, and at the top here we have new laptop request. That's where our summary came in. That's how our summary is going to be presented. We see our form, how it was presented. This is the requester's form. So we can see that Owen Pyatt raised this request via a portal, and the reason that that's important is because internal users can still create requests with our create button up here. So we see that that came from the portal. And then as mentioned also earlier, I had mentioned that our provide more details was actually linked to our description field. So here we see that it's being presented as the description. I do need a lot of help. Kylie could provide more info there. So, and then below here, we see a little more in-depth breakdown of, and proof, I guess, I'm not sure what the word is, of how that actually reached into our asset management database here. All right, continuing to move down, we see that there are a few more options under this activity log for our agents than there were for our customers. So we have an all, and that's going to show all activity on the ticket. And then we have comments, but you may notice an extra button here that is add internal note. So you are able to reply just directly to the customer, or you're able to add an internal note for other agents that might be associated to this project, which is a cool feature. So we'll just go ahead and hop in and we'll ask Wade for some help here. Get him reeled in, as I like to do on all my work. And we'll move over to the right-hand side of the screen where we see that the ticket is currently waiting for approval. So this is actually where we'll change the status of the ticket. And if we were to hover right here and select view workflow, we can see the full build of the workflow. As you can see, this is following a rather complex pathway all the way to our resolved status. And as mentioned before, gray, that is referencing, so we have our three status categories. We have to do, in progress, and done. Gray referencing that to do status category, blue referencing the in progress status category, and then green referencing the done status category. So as we see here, this ticket is waiting for approval. So let me hop in here, and I'm actually going to add myself as the approver, so I can show you guys what the approval process actually looks like, and we'll actually get a little sneak peek of some automation for Jira running here as I approve this message. You'll notice that the issue is automatically transitioned to waiting for support, which is pretty cool. And hovering back to all of our history, we see here that that's something that might be logged in the history of the ticket. So we see that automation for Jira updated the status, and there we go. All right, and then this next quadrant, we have our SLAs. So these are out of the box. We're going to touch on these a lot more in depth here in a little bit. So time to first response and time to resolution, those are the two SLAs that do come default. So we have 4 hours and 8 hours, and then those are fully customizable on the back end, and you can have them not appear at all. So working down, we have our assignee. So you're able to assign the ticket to someone. This is a user picker field within Jira. Another cool thing you can just do is just click this button right here to assign the ticket directly to you. So we see who the reporter was, otherwise known as the creator of the ticket. We see the request type, and we're able to actually switch out the request types here. Say our requester actually submitted the wrong type of request. We see our two associated knowledge base articles in case our agents are needing a little refresher on the issue at hand. And then we see another thing to note here is our priority field. This is a customizable list. Unfortunately, it is globally configured. So usually a Jira admin conversation here to get to get priorities added or taken away, because that will affect everyone using the priority field. Click out of that. And then we have our request participants. If you remember, I actually shared the ticket with Sam when I was creating it. So that's actually what I was actually doing, was creating a request participant on the back end. And then a really cool field here, great for auditing, great for checking your work. We have our rule execution field, and I'm going to actually go into here and show you guys what's actually going on with this field. So, you know, as your instance becomes more and more mature, your automation list grows, and you're having a hard time knowing what automation is actually working. If everything's working the way it should be, you can hop into the ticket. You can see which automations are associated to this ticket, which are scoped to this ticket, and then whether or not they're actually running correctly. So that's a really useful field. And then moving down here, we don't have any labels, nothing. These are all customizable. I want to take a second and hop into our issue view just to kind of show you guys how that edit issue screen is actually configured. So we have just the ability to drag and drop different fields that we want to be present on that edit issue field. So let me go back. And before we move on, I want to mention this button right here, create subtask. So this is really cool. You're able to just directly create a subtask directly from this view. So say you know that there's a lot more work to be done here. You would just go in, create the subtask. Once that's created, you could mouse needed. Once that's created, you could follow that link, and you could assign it to someone. You could have more fields displayed here to require more information. So a lot of cool functionality there. All right, let me check my notes here before we move on to make sure I covered everything. All right, so now let's talk about queues. So we're going to head back out to the project. And we see at the top, well, to kind of preface a little bit what queues are. So for those of you that are familiar with Jira and Jira software, you're probably used to working off of a board, whether it be a Kanban board or, you know, within a sprint and a Scrum board. So Jira service projects actually don't have boards. They have queues. So we'll go ahead and jump into our queue here, and we'll just go over some of the functionality with queues. So we see all my tickets. Right now I do have one. Because I just assigned our ticket to myself. So if we want to hop into these three little ellipses up here in the top right, we'd go into edit queue, and we'll kind of see how the queues are actually built, how they're actually working. So these are built off of JQL for those of you that are familiar. If you're not familiar, that is Jira query language. A lot of customization there, and almost everything in Jira that pulls information is built off of JQL, whether that's automation, queues, filters, reports, you can name SLAs, you name it, it's probably built on JQL. So we have the ability to type long form JQL, and you can also switch to basic, which is really useful if you want to, if you're not as comfortable free form typing your JQL. So one thing to note, well, actually let's keep moving. I'll come back to that point. So down at the bottom here, we see how behind this haze, we see our team priority and our other queues. So the way that that's actually configured is here within our manage queues section. So when we are managing our queues, we can reassign the order and whether or not they fall under the team priority or the other. Something to note here, this is a project change. This is not an individual change. So if you are, needing certain queues to show up higher on the list, there's another way to do that if you want to do that individually. And the way to do that is if you just hover over a queue here, you see this star. And once you add to starred, you know, a very common one would be assigned to me. Once you add that to the starred, that is just for you. So that won't affect all the other users within the project. And one other thing to note here, you are actually also able to customize this column here to present different fields within the queues. So this is this is really helpful, especially for specific teams requiring specific fields to be portrayed on the queues. Unfortunately, not every field you're able to interact with. There's no formula for which are and aren't. You can transition the issue directly from the queue screen, but what's best practice would just be to see what your work is for the day, and then you would just follow the issue ID to take you to the actual ticket to get all the work done within the ticket. So we'll go ahead and unstar that and head back to our Manage Queue section to show you guys how to create a new queue. So if we were to create a new queue, we'd go to our Manage Queues button, and then we'd see that we're presented with this button up here, Create New Queue. So then we would go ahead and name our queue, so all closed, and then we would go down to our JQL line and we would say resolution is not empty. And what's really nice with Jira is they give you this nice little friendly green check mark if your JQL, if Jira is actually correctly reading your JQL. So here we see all of our issues that are actually completed or closed. One thing to note is sometimes resolution equals done may not be all inclusive, because an issue can have different types of resolution. So I like to use this resolution is not empty formula to pull in all closed tickets and not just done. Let me see if that's, and then, yep, here, as I said before, you'll be able to edit which fields are presented here on the queue. And then one other thing to note, that is also project-wide. So don't be fooled by assigned to me. That is not just your queue. You know, as we saw before, the JQL for that is assignee equals current user. So it is just one queue that's presenting different issues to whoever is logged in. So that's queues. A lot of functionality there. Once again, they're built on JQL, so you can really pull just about anything. You know, some interesting use cases are you could have a field that lives on your form that has a team drop down. You would have, you know, your 10 different teams and then your 10 different queues. Whenever that option is selected, that ticket is routed to that queue for that team. So queues they're step one in how to work a ticket in Jira Service Management. All right, so now let's head back to our project, and we'll scroll all the way down here to our project settings. So then we'll scroll down to our SLAs. Oh my gosh, refresh. We'll scroll down to our SLAs. So we see our 4 SLAs that we've created. We'll open this one up, time to resolution. So this first goal of all remaining issues, that's going to appear by default, and we'll show you that once we create one. And then you're able to set the time goal, and then you're also able to set the calendar. And you're also able to create your own calendar, which we'll also show you in a second. Working down here, we have our conditions. So to start counting time when, we have our issue created. And then, so when the issue is created, time will start counting. And then we have this condition here of when resolution is cleared. You may be thinking why that is, but a lot of times on a workflow, there will be a transition to reopen a ticket. And a lot of times within that transition, there will be a post function. Jira's, there's so many layers. It's like, you know, don't we wish that this webinar could be 5 hours long? No? Okay. So within that transition, there may be a post function that's clearing the resolution. So you may want the time to start counting again if that ticket is reopened and that ticket is beginning to have work done to it once again. Then we have the conditions to pause counting time during. So a few statuses, if the ticket is just pending, you may want time to be paused. And then if you want, you know, these are all extremely use case specific. But if you have a waiting for customer status, you could also want the SLA to pause time while you're waiting on the customer and not count that towards your actual time to resolution goal. And then we have our final condition to finish counting time when the resolution is set, whether that's manually or with the use of automation to set the resolution. Then down here, we will have how the SLA will be displayed on the ticket. And once we create one, we'll see that there's a few options there. And once again, you know, these goals are built on JQL. So you could have a different SLA time goal for every single request type. You can make these SLAs as specific as you need them to be. So let's go ahead and hop into how we would add an SLA. So we'll go ahead and select Add SLA. Up here, this doesn't always look like a type box, but this is actually where you would type the name. New SLA. So as we see here, as I'd stated before, we see our all remaining issues, excuse me, is there by default. If you don't want that, because it's like, you know, you may not always want every SLA to just show on every related issue or all remaining issues. So what you would do is just leave this at no target, and that way the SLA won't appear on the ticket at all. So we'll go ahead and we would hit add there. So for the time goal, it's only in hours or minutes. So one day, if you're on a 24/7 calendar, or you know, 8 hours if you're on the sample 9 to 5. And then we have, oh, I'm sorry, that's in our, well, that works too. So in our custom line here, we could have 16 hours, and then on our 9 to 5 calendar. And then here's where we would use JQL to hone in our SLA. The JQL input on this, on the SLA creation, is a little bit weird. I would recommend always clicking your selection. So just kind of give it a little help with the first few letters of what you're trying to get at, and then click to select. It's a little bit picky on this screen. It always is. I'm not sure why. So we could say request type equals, and this is just scoped at your project. So you'll see all of the request types that are within this project, and then every time there's a change request, so on and so forth, and you could have that look at and type. Well, that would probably be an or, but a lot of functionality here. Or type, which would be issue type, equals change. So that's how we would create a new time goal for our SLA. And then, as mentioned before, here is our conditions, and we already talked pretty in depth there, but you can get pretty creative with, and this is linked directly to your workflow. So whatever statuses you have will appear in this dropdown for the conditional build out of our SLAs. And then, as mentioned before, we have our SLA format display, just two options here. We have our due date centric and our time centric. And then really quickly, I want to show you guys how to build out a new calendar. Give me one sec. A new calendar to map our SLAs to. So we would just click this small calendar button up in the top, we would then add, and it's going to present all of our calendars that are currently created. And we'll hit add calendar and then full functionality here in military time to as well as set your time zone, and you can name your calendar, and then full functionality. Say you have a second shift service desk team, you could build out their calendar to have their own SLAs. So a lot of functionality there. All right, so we'll head back to our project here, and we'll go ahead and talk about reports. I'm sorry. Back to project, and then we see our reports tab, which is under our knowledge tab under our sidebar. So we'll go ahead and select reports. So we have some default reports here at the top, and under that we have our custom reports that we've already created. And you can create your own reports down here by selecting new report. And it could obviously get very tricky if someone named a new report, because there's not a lot of differentiation between the type of button, but this is actually our button to create a new report. That being stated, let's look at this report here named SLA Met versus Breached. So we can see the number of SLAs that have been met or breached in a certain time frame. For example, this is saying we've met 0 SLAs and breached 109 just in the past week. I do want to preface this is just our demo site, so every time we come in here and create an issue, it just gets left. This is not our company SLA met versus breached. So you're actually able to customize how far back you're wanting to look for this report, and this is standard on all reports. You're able to customize the range, and then you're also able to build out a custom range. And instead of just mindlessly going through all these reports, let me try to tell a little bit of a story and how you could use reports to solve issues and cure bottlenecks within your process. So obviously there would be something wrong with our process if we were meeting 0 SLAs. So let's go ahead and look at workload. So let's say Wade had 100 issues in progress, and Steve, our next most allocated agent, only had 2. That might be step 1 in acknowledging maybe why our SLAs are always breached is because they're just sitting in Wade's backlog. And because he's so allocated, he's unable to meet the requests of our customers. Another thing we could possibly look at as to why our SLAs aren't breached, we could go to requests deflected. Are we simply taking in too many requests? Are our knowledge base articles not helpful? So to preface all the way back at the beginning of our demo, when we saw that little yes or no in our extremely unhelpful Latin cat knowledge base article, we would see that that's actually where this is getting routed, that yes or no. And then we can see how many views from the portal we're actually getting of our knowledge base articles. So a lot of stories to be told and a lot of problems to be solved using reports. All right. I forgot to preface at the beginning to put your questions in the Q&A box. I'm not sure. We'll go ahead and take a look and see if any questions had come through. It looks like we have one here. Explain the difference between request types and issue types. That is a great question, and I'm excited that it got asked because I can show you a little bit more of the back end on how JSM is actually configured. So let's go out back to project, and we'll go down to our project settings, and we'll circle down to our request types tab. So here we have our breakdown of where all of our request types are actually created. So we were actually here briefly looking at the issue view. So to touch on our request form, this is where the request form is made. Like I said before, there's not a lot of functionality here. You're just able to present system fields and custom fields. You're not able to create your own form fields within the request form. So going back to the original question at hand, which is what is the difference between request types and issue types? So as we see here, we see our list of request types, and then we see our list of issue types. And as you can see, there's far less issue types than request types. The reason Atlassian built JSM this way is because issue types are one of the most foundational schemas within Jira. And so they're how you associate tickets to workflows, screen schemes, field configurations. Just about everything on the back end for your ticket is linked through the issue type. So instead of having to make, your company might have 100 request types, instead of having to make 100 different issue types, which you also totally still can do. But say you have 100 request types, but they all follow the same workflow. There's no need to have 100 different issue types. That is why there's a difference here between issue types and request types. So just remember, request types really don't carry that much weight in terms of what they actually are and what they're linked to. It's just so your customer and user can, and so your agents can break down what type of request to take in. And then a cool brand new feature within JSM back in the day, 3 weeks ago, you could not change out the issue type within a request type. You know, say you'd been reporting on a certain request type for, many, 2 or 3 years. You have all this data on the request type, but hey, there's a workflow change and it actually fits the workflow of another issue type. You'd have to create a new request type, and it would be really a bummer for all your reporting, all your filters. It would just be a big bummer. But now with this replace workflow function, you can hop right in and replace the workflow, thereby also replacing the issue type. So great functionality there, great efficiency gain. All right. Show how to configure the forms for request types. Great question. As I'd mentioned before, there is, so we have our request type, then we have our request form, and then here we have our forms, or what I call our dynamic forms. So we would hover over this forms button, give that a click, and it would prompt us with this form screen where we see all the forms that are created, as well as this create form button here in the top right. So if I were to click that, I know I didn't just click that, but if I were to, I'd be prompted with this screen, very similar to this, would just be completely blank form, and we'd name that new form. And so here, forms could almost be their own hour-long webinar. There's a lot of functionality here. You're able to freeform text, so to help prompt your users in a certain way. And you'd be able to impact this text just the same way that we've been able to in all of our wiki style text fields. And then we have our add field button, where we'd have the ability to add any type. These were what I was referring to as our form fields. These aren't actual custom fields yet. So we'd have to, so say we have a drop-down field or a multi-select with select drop-down. It's going to input that field into the form. Here's where we would actually label our form, and that's that would just be the name. I don't know, form field. And then we have our description to give the user some context about what to actually do and what to input here. And then we have our ability to add some choices. And then we're also able to add other here, which is really useful. You can add a default answer. you can, and then here is where we're actually able to link Jira fields. So here we're presented with all fields that are within Jira. This is global. And so if there's a custom field that you'd like to link to this field, this is where you would do that. And the use case and reason for that is form field, the way it is right now, there's no way to report on it. But once we link it to something, then now it's fully linked to a field and we can report on it. And then here's where we would add whether or not the response was required. All right. Well, I'm sorry if we didn't get to your question. Please feel free to follow up with me or Kylie and or anyone here at Expium. We'd love to follow up with you and answer your question more in depth and get to know your process. I do also want to acknowledge the winner of our giveaway today is Paul Aronson, Aronson. Congratulations. Please email Kylie to receive your prize, and we'll put that email in the chat so you guys can get a hold of Kylie. Yeah, well, I just want to thank everyone so much for coming. Please, if you have more questions, please follow up, and also really think about maybe joining a Jira Bootcamp or at least our ITSM webinar. Our ITSM webinar is free, just like this one. The Jira Bootcamps, those are paid. But yeah, we just thank everyone for coming and hopefully get to know you guys more. Thanks.